Hello everyone, no respawns here. Hope you're having a grand week so far. So in this video, I want to have a little bit of a discussion on Elder Scrolls Online, and more specifically, if you enjoyed Skyrim or Morrowind, would you enjoy ESO? And the reason why is because that's kind of the approach I had going into the game. Namely, I did like MMOs, but my first kind of love of the series was playing it as a single-player experience. And I thought potentially it would be an interesting video to make, and also just experiment to make by myself, to see how the game fared as a single-player experience compared to Skyrim. So what I'm going to do is a bit of an informal video, a bit chatty, I guess, but I'm going to talk about kind of elements of Skyrim and elements of ESO, and kind of how they work, and are they similar. With the idea that, you know, if you're a person who doesn't like the MMO elements, is ESO a game you should be playing, especially if you enjoyed Skyrim? Now, obviously, spoiler, I think you should. I was actually surprised at how similar it was in many ways, but I'm going to go into that in a bit more of a broader detail. So to give you an idea, I started playing a few weeks ago, and I have completed the base game main story, as well as the first major expansion, so Morrowind, and I'm currently playing Somerset, so I haven't actually got into Elsewhere yet, the new expansion that came out on the 4th, well, 22nd if you're playing on PC, which is what I am doing. I'm using PC and using an Xbox controller. Now, the first thing that surprised me was that I had played quite a few MMOs in the past, namely World of Warcraft, and so there's a certain way that the story is told in World of Warcraft, namely that you're not really the hero, you're a hero, and therefore that affects the way you interact with quest givers, and also how you affect the story as a whole. So to give you a great example is that every zone, you know, most of the quests are single, you know, that they are solo content, but generally speaking, each zone will have some kind of group quest that you need to do. There are dungeons that are tied into the zone story, and also the kind of the main story at any given expansion. The big bad guy is almost always ultimately defeated with either a raid or, you know, sometimes a dungeon, but almost usually a raid of, you know, 10 to 25 people. And that's what I expected going in with Elder Scrolls Online, and I was very pleasantly surprised that they've done it the opposite. And so ESO feels like a game that effectively you are the hero, and all of the main elements, actually not all of the elements of the story, the kind of main narrative, you lead the narrative. You are the hero of that story, and there is absolutely no requirement for you to do anything as a group, to the point where you'd have to actively bring a friend along with you, almost like a co-op game as opposed to an MMO, where they would join you in your story as just a fun thing to do rather than as a requirement. So, you know, I'm obviously not going to give you any spoilers, but I completed the main story, and I literally didn't do any kind of multiplayer content, because I wanted to play it, I wanted to see if it was possible. And at first I thought, you know, I'd have to miss bits, but none of the main story whatsoever had any group requirements. It was a complete single-player experience, which I think is absolutely awesome. It's definitely a different take from what I was expecting. You know, I did have that, you know, preconception going in that it would be more akin to World of Warcraft, and it was very, very pleasantly surprising. So that's one thing. If you're kind of thinking that, you know, oh, I don't have any mates, or I'm not good with people, just don't worry. To be utterly frank, you can even I did actually turn off chat. You know, you'll see some footage of me playing, and you won't actually see any chat dialogue of people coming up, because I've just kind of signed out of all of the chat channels because I didn't want them distracting me. So that's great. So there is absolutely no requirement. In essence, the game kind of feels other players, you'll see them around, and you'll see them around all the time actually, and they will sometimes be in, you know, delves and doing the same quest at you at the same time, but it almost feels like just their NPCs just going about their day, if you get my point. You know, you are the hero of this story, and effectively the players are just NPCs. Obviously you can join them, you can chat them if you want to, but there is no requirement. So that's pretty cool. So now let's talk about the questing itself. So the way ESO works is similar-ish to Skyrim. The fact is you have side quests, and then you have the main overarching quest. In this instance, they're called zone quests. So effectively, if you go from your starting area and just follow the zone quests through, it will kind of slowly move you around the world map. And the zone quests themselves are very, very, very good. They're much longer in terms of the number of quests compared to Skyrim. So to give you an idea, if I were to do the main quest in Skyrim, it would take me, I would guess, if I didn't rush, I could probably do it in about 15-ish hours. I think maybe up to 20. Say about 20 hours. Skyrim's a bit hard to gauge, but I would roughly say from start to finish, just the main quest, without rushing, it would take me about 20 hours. In ESO, probably a little bit more of a slower pace because of the fact that I was new to the game. It took me from when I did my checked my playtime from when I finished the base game main story, it took me about 52 hours, which I think is really, really cool. Now the reason why I did it that way is because one thing, and this is a negative towards ESO, is that I felt the side quests didn't blend into the main story as fluidly. The side quests are very, very good, but for me, the problem is, and I'll get onto this a little bit broader, is the ESO is a little bit confusing when you're going in because of just how much content there is to do, which meant that the initial questing in terms of what I should do was a little bit difficult for me to decide upon. And what I did is basically when I would get into a zone, I would pick up side quests and main quests and then kind of just do them all together. And one thing I quickly realised is that ESO is much more enjoyable if you just do the zone quest first, and then if you just want a break from it, then do the side quests. It's a little bit different, but I think it largely feeds into the MMO element. So if you're a little bit nervous about me describing that, what I mean to say is if you just want a really solid single-player experience, you can probably get a few hundred hours just doing, like a good 100 hours or so, just doing the zone story quests from all of the expansions. One thing to note as well is there are 3 alliances. So that was me just doing the Aldmeri Dominion playing as a Khajiit. Not to spoil anything too much, but you can have that character go through the main quest in the other alliances as well, or you can just start a new character. So realistically, just running the main quests, you could probably get a good 100+ hours of gameplay, and then that is including the side quests, which the side quests themselves are very, very fun. It's just, I think, because of the way I started, it was a little bit overwhelming and confusing for me, and it kind of upset the flow a little bit. And I think that probably you will enjoy it a bit more if you were to play it maybe looking at the zone quests first and then just doing the side quests anecdotally when you feel there might be an interesting one to try out. And this segues reasonably swiftly into how accessible ESO is as a game. And that's where it potentially not necessarily stumbles, but where it puts a lot of people off. Because people see, the fact that it's got a really cool story, and it's an absolutely stunning looking game, but then they get into it and it feels a little bit, well, one, very overwhelming, but also a little bit clunky. Especially if your only experience with the Elder Scrolls series is Skyrim, you especially might find the combat very confusing and not as fluid. And to extent it is, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing. It's just, effectively, it's a Elder Scrolls game with an MMO play style. So that means that it still follows those MMO conventions. And the biggest thing is that your attacks are based around RPG abilities rather than, slashing a sword or shooting a bow. It's like comparing an FPS to a JRPG. Is a bit of a clumsy analogy, but it's kind of like that in the sense of, rather than, for example, you do, and in the introduction intro, it will show you, oh, you slash like this, and you use power attacks like this, but realistically, you really want to be using your active abilities from your skill trees, and there are loads and loads you can choose, but I think because of the fact that you probably come in with that preconception, and I've heard this feedback from a lot of people when I've been talking about it on Twitter, a lot of people do feel the combat is less fluid, and arguably, ultimately, as an MMO, it is, but I don't personally think it's a bad thing. Weirdly, it's one of those things. If you, for example, if you never played Skyrim but played Morrowind, you probably wouldn't find the combat so awkward. And it's not awkward. It's just different. And I would recommend, I mean, ultimately this is one of those ones where it'll be just down to personal preference, but if you're kind of watching me play here, you can see I'm activating abilities and, you know, slashing with various attacks. I'm not actually using just slash. The only time I use just slash or just shoot with my bow is when I'm out of stamina or magicka. One thing that I do actually really like, and it does tie into this abilities over kind of shooting and slashing with a sword, is the fact is the customizability with these abilities is absolutely very cool. And I'm not going to go that too much in this video as such, but I just wanted to touch upon it. Is the fact is, if you've ever kind of, you know, looked at ESO and thought, okay, you know, how do I build my character, that kind of thing, you probably know that there are, you know, just countless builds out there. The reason being is that each class has their own 3 select skill, kind of base skill trees, and then the way that ESO differs quite heavily from Skyrim is that you can still join all the guilds if you want, but joining those guilds provides you with separate skill trees that you can also put skill points into, and also things like you can get skill points from other elements of the game as well, such as passives from crafting, and also I imagine there are other ones that I've not found as well as racial abilities as well. So there's actually an armor too, for example. So if you play, you know, as an example, I play a stamina build effectively, that means that I've actually got a few skill points from, and active skills and passives from my armor. So if you, for example, if you like that kind of meta customizability of making a playstyle that's very unique to how you enjoy playing, this is where I think it almost shines brighter than Skyrim to an extent, because you have way more customizability on your character's actual kind of meta and kind of their build element. So yeah, I've spoken about the quests and also the MMO elements and just kind of the combat in general. I really enjoyed it. There's also things like crafting as well, as I've mentioned. There's just loads of little stuff you can do, like fishing. There's loads of just kind of time-killing, just fun stuff. You get them in MMOs, you get them in Skyrim as well. Basically, if you've played the crafting system is maybe initially a bit confusing, and I'm not going to touch upon that now, but the crafting guides online are really good, but you can craft in very much the same way you can in Skyrim. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the setting as well before I end the video, which is kind of where it is. So it's set, I think, a few hundred years, I think it's 100 years, kind of in the earlier point. So you're basically, for example, a great example is I played as a Khajiit in the Aldmeri Dominion, and obviously played Skyrim, not a big fan of the Aldmeri Dominion, and this was actually one of the parts that I really liked about the game, was because it was nice seeing, because obviously it's set in, you know, Nirn, it's set in the entire world, so you get to travel on the areas that's unlocked, but you get to travel in areas that you may have not seen before, but you also get to understand the history of some of the factions that you may have encountered in Skyrim. So obviously in Skyrim, the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion aren't particularly very nice. They're a little bit, you know, unless you're a sociopath, you know, they're not particularly very likable. However, in ESO, this is a bit more of an optimistic and kind of earlier out. It's not even the Aldmeri Dominion, it's it's the first Aldmeri Dominion. And so obviously there are still the elements that you can see how this society would slowly develop into the Aldmeri Dominion we know, but there's a kind of a battle of ideas, and obviously that's, spoiler, to an extent, but that's part of the Aldmeri Dominion main quest. It's very cool, and it's very enjoyable. So if you are one of those people who just really enjoyed the lore and the story of the Elder Scrolls games, but especially Skyrim, you absolutely have a game here you can enjoy. It's very cool. It's way more deeper than I was expecting. It's as deep as Skyrim's, effectively. So there are books everywhere you can read, and there are just people you can talk to. And again, as you are the main hero of this story, you really do feel like you're a affecting the kind of the history that you later saw in Skyrim and indeed Morrowind. I especially like the fact that in the Morrowind DLC, because I'd obviously played Morrowind when I was younger, to actually explore Vardenfell again at higher graphics was amazing, and to meet Vivek again, because you meet him just at the start, which is one of the Tribune, one of the living gods, was just so cool, and obviously having him fully voiced and everything was just a really, really enjoyable experience. But anyway, I'm gonna leave that there because obviously I don't want to ramble too much. I had to re-record this because I was way too waffly the first time. So yeah, overall I would say if you are a little bit apprehensive of ESO because of the fact that you don't like MMOs, but you really enjoyed Skyrim, I would definitely recommend giving it a try. The only thing that I think will put people off is the fact that the actual gameplay is still MMO in or kind of like RPG MMO in terms of the way you actually interact with enemies compared to Skyrim, which is effectively a sword and shield and bow and magicka FPS effectively, and that might initially take some learning, but overall I think it, for me, doesn't kill the experience. I think if you played things, older MMOs and older RPGs, that you'll be completely fine. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. As always, follow me on Twitter at norespawns. I will have definitely more ESO videos. This will be a permanent staple on the channel right now because I'm really enjoying it and I just want to make loads of content on it. So look out for that. Obviously, still Fallout videos. I'll have another build up soon, as well as as I was going to do that before this, but now I'm going to do it afterwards, the final episode of my Don't Starve Let's Play, which lets me segue into making other games Let's Plays. But yes, you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I will talk to you lovely people soon. You take care.